Bulgaria. A name that conjures images of ancient history, stunning Black Sea beaches, and a rich cultural tapestry. But beneath this picturesque facade lies a darker reality. This is the story of the Bulgarian Mafia, a force that rose from the ashes of communism to become one of the most powerful and enigmatic criminal networks in Europe. To understand the Bulgarian Mafia, we must journey back to 1989. The fall of the Iron Curtain sent shockwaves across Eastern Europe, and Bulgaria was no exception. Former members of the secret police, the Državna Sigurnost, found themselves jobless, but with valuable skills and connections. These individuals, along with former athletes and military personnel, would form the nucleus of the Bulgarian Mafia. The newly formed government struggled to maintain order, creating an environment of impunity, allowing the mafia to operate with little fear of consequences. In the lawless landscape of post-communist Bulgaria, one particular business model proved particularly effective for the burgeoning mafia private security. Two groups, VIS and SIC, rose to prominence in this sector. While ostensibly offering protection services, these organizations were, in reality, sophisticated criminal enterprises involved in a wide range of illegal activities. They extorted businesses, intimidated rivals, and carried out contract killings with impunity. Zasens, an acronym for Viernost, Investiții, Sigurnost, Loyalty, Investments, Security, emerged from the shadows of Bulgaria's communist past with a clear objective: to capitalize on the nascent free market by any means necessary. Founded by former wrestlers and athletes, VIS projected an image of strength and intimidation, quickly becoming the muscle for hire in a country grappling with lawlessness. What began as providing security for businesses quickly spiraled into a vast criminal network. VIS strong-armed its way into protection rackets, extorting money from shops, restaurants, and nightclubs. As their wealth and influence grew, VIS expanded their operations, branching out into smuggling, drug trafficking, and money laundering. While VIS was building its empire, another formidable force was emerging in the Bulgarian Underworld, SIC, short for Security Insurance Company. Founded by former members of the communist-era secret police, SIC possessed a chilling understanding of surveillance, intimidation, and manipulation. Unlike VIS, SIC preferred a more subtle approach, operating with a calculated ruthlessness that instilled fear in even the most hardened criminals. They infiltrated legitimate businesses, using them as fronts for their criminal activities while maintaining a veneer of respectability. SIC's expertise in intelligence gathering and psychological warfare proved to be a potent combination. The rise of VIS and SIC inevitably led to a bloody power struggle, as both groups vied for control of Bulgaria's criminal underworld. The streets of Sofia, once relatively peaceful, transformed into battlegrounds punctuated by car bombs, drive-by shootings, and brazen assassinations. These were not just turf wars between rival gangs, they were battles for economic dominance, political influence, and ultimately, control of the country itself. The violence escalated with each passing day, leaving a trail of bodies and a climate of fear in its wake. The Bulgarian government seemed powerless to stop the violence. The mafia wars of the 1990s cast a long shadow over Bulgarian society. Ordinary citizens found themselves caught in the crossfire, their lives at risk simply for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Businesses, both large and small, lived under the constant threat of extortion. The mafia's reach extended into every corner of the economy, stifling competition and hindering economic growth. The judicial system, riddled with corruption, offered little recourse for those seeking justice. Amidst the fear and corruption, a few brave journalists and activists dared to challenge the mafia's grip on Bulgaria, determined to expose the truth and hold those in power accountable. One such journalist was Georgi Stoev, a former organized crime figure turned investigative reporter. Stoev's insider knowledge made him a formidable threat to the mafia, and he used his platform to expose their secrets, naming names and detailing their criminal activities. Tragically, Stoev's bravery ultimately cost him his life. In 2008, he was gunned down in broad daylight in Sofia, a bullet to the head silencing his voice forever. As the dust settled on the bloody mafia wars of the 1990s, a new chapter began in the story of the Bulgarian Mafia. The raw violence that had characterized their early years gave way to a more sophisticated approach, one that prioritized financial gain and political influence over brute force. The Bulgarian government, under pressure from the European Union, began cracking down on organized crime, albeit with limited success. The mafia, recognizing the need to adapt, sought new ways to operate under the radar, laundering their ill-gotten gains through legitimate businesses, and investing in sectors like real estate, tourism, and finance. This new breed of Bulgarian mafioso understood that true power lay not in controlling the streets, but in controlling the institutions, the banks, the courts, the media, and ultimately the government itself. While VIS and SIC may have faded from the headlines, their demise paved the way for new players to emerge. Groups that had learned from the mistakes of their predecessors and adapted to the changing landscape of organized crime in Bulgaria. One such group, shrouded in secrecy and feared for its ruthlessness, is TIM, often referred to as the Octopus of Varna. Formed in the early 1990s by former members of Bulgaria's elite naval commando unit, TIM quickly established itself as a force to be reckoned with in the port city of Varna, a strategic hub for smuggling and trafficking. Unlike the more flamboyant VIS and SIC, TIM preferred to operate in the shadows, avoiding unnecessary attention and cultivating an aura of invincibility. TIM's power lies not just in its economic might, but also in its web of connections that extend to the highest levels of government and law enforcement. The Bulgarian Mafia, as exemplified by groups like TIM, has mastered the art of blending into the background, using legitimate businesses as fronts for their criminal enterprises. One of the key sectors exploited by the Mafia is real estate. The influx of foreign investment after Bulgaria's EU accession led to a construction boom, particularly along the Black Sea coast. Mafia groups, flush with cash from drug trafficking, human smuggling and extortion, poured their money into hotels, resorts and apartment complexes, often using straw men and shell companies to conceal their involvement. The tourism industry, a major source of revenue for Bulgaria, has also become a target for mafia infiltration. The Bulgarian Mafia's infiltration of legitimate businesses has come at a steep price for the country. Corruption, once concentrated in the upper echelons of power, has seeped down into every level of society, eroding trust in institutions and hindering economic development. The judiciary, often seen as the last bastion of hope against organized crime, has been compromised by mafia influence. Judges and prosecutors, susceptible to bribery or intimidation, often turn a blind eye to criminal activities or issue rulings that favor those with connections, undermining the rule of law and eroding public trust in the justice system. Bulgaria's geographical location has proven to be both a blessing and a curse. Situated at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, it has served as a bridge between East and West for centuries, facilitating trade and cultural exchange. However, this strategic location has also made it a prime target for smugglers seeking to exploit its porous borders and lax law enforcement. The Bulgarian Mafia, with their knowledge of the terrain, their connections in neighboring countries, and their ruthless efficiency, were quick to capitalize on this situation. The country became a major transit point for everything from contraband cigarettes and counterfeit goods, to drugs, weapons, and even people. Section 2. The drug pipeline, from poppies to profits. Bulgaria's location along the so-called Balkan route, a major drug trafficking corridor linking Afghanistan and the Middle East to Western Europe, has made it a key player in the global narcotics trade. The country serves as a transit point for heroin, cocaine, and synthetic drugs, which are smuggled across its borders and then distributed throughout Europe. The Bulgarian Mafia, with their established smuggling networks and their connections to international criminal organizations, have played a significant role in facilitating this trade. They have invested heavily in logistics and transportation, establishing sophisticated routes and methods for moving large quantities of drugs undetected. The profits from drug trafficking are staggering, providing the mafia with a steady stream of income that they use to finance their other criminal activities, corrupt officials, and expand their influence. The social costs, however, are equally significant. Drug addiction, crime, and violence plague communities along the trafficking routes, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. Despite efforts by the Bulgarian government and international law enforcement agencies to crack down on drug trafficking, the flow of narcotics continues. The mafia, with their adaptability and their ability to exploit weaknesses in the system, have proven to be a formidable adversary, constantly seeking new routes, methods, and allies to stay one step ahead of the authorities. Section 3. Arming the Underworld, the Legacy of the Iron Curtain. The fall of the Iron Curtain not only opened up borders for trade and travel, but also flooded the black market with a vast arsenal of weapons from the former Soviet bloc. Bulgaria, with its large stockpiles of Soviet-era weaponry and its lax export controls, became a major source of arms for criminal organizations, terrorist groups, and rogue regimes around the world. The Bulgarian Mafia, with their connections to corrupt officials and their experience in smuggling, seized upon this opportunity, establishing themselves as key players in the global arms trade. They exploited loopholes in the system, forging documents, bribing officials, and using front companies to move weapons across borders undetected. The types of weapons trafficked range from small arms and light weapons, such as pistols, rifles, and machine guns, to heavier weaponry, including rocket-propelled grenades, anti-aircraft guns, and even surface-to-air missiles. These weapons have fueled conflicts, facilitated terrorist attacks, and destabilized entire regions. The international community has made efforts to curb the flow of illegal arms from Bulgaria, providing assistance to strengthen border controls and tighten export regulations. However, the lure of huge profits, coupled with the mafia's deep roots in the country's institutions, continues to hinder efforts to effectively combat this illicit trade. Section 4. Trafficking in Human Misery, Modern-Day Slavery. Behind the facade of Bulgaria's picturesque landscapes and burgeoning tourism industry lies a sinister reality. The country has become a major hub for human trafficking, a modern form of slavery that exploits the most vulnerable members of society for profit. The collapse of communism and the allure of a better life in Western Europe have made Bulgaria a prime target for traffickers who prey on the hopes and dreams of those seeking to escape poverty, unemployment, and lack of opportunity. Women, men, and children are lured with false promises of jobs, education, or even marriage, only to find themselves trapped in a nightmare of exploitation and abuse. The Bulgarian Mafia, with their well-established smuggling networks, their ruthless efficiency, and their ability to operate with impunity, have played a central role in this horrific trade. They have transformed Bulgaria into a transit country, a human pipeline through which victims are trafficked to various destinations within Europe and beyond. The forms of exploitation vary, but the most common are forced labor, sexual exploitation, and organ harvesting. Victims are often subjected to violence, threats, and psychological manipulation to keep them under control. Their passports and other documents are confiscated, trapping them in a foreign land with no means of escape. The invisible chains exploitation in the sex trade. Within the dark underbelly of human trafficking, the sex trade stands as a particularly abhorrent manifestation. Bulgaria, unfortunately, has become a source country for women and girls forced into prostitution, their lives traded as commodities in a lucrative and brutal industry. The methods used to ensnare victims are often insidious, preying on their vulnerability and desperation. Traffickers may pose as boyfriends, offering love and a new life abroad, only to later coerce their victims into prostitution. Others may exploit economic hardship, promising well-paying jobs in restaurants or bars, which turn out to be fronts for brothels. Once trapped in the sex trade, victims face a grim reality. They are forced to work long hours, often under inhumane conditions with little or no pay. They are subjected to physical and sexual violence, denied medical care, and threatened with harm to themselves or their families if they attempt to escape. The psychological scars of sexual exploitation run deep, leaving many victims traumatized and struggling to rebuild their lives even after escaping their captors. The Bulgarian government, under pressure from international organizations, has taken some steps to combat human trafficking, but much work remains to be done to dismantle the networks, protect victims, and address the root causes of this heinous crime. The digital battlefield, new frontiers in crime. As the 21st century unfolded, the Bulgarian Mafia, always attuned to emerging opportunities, recognized the vast and largely untapped potential of cybercrime. The internet, with its anonymity, global reach, and minimal barriers to entry, provided fertile ground for a new breed of criminal, one who could operate from the shadows, leaving behind no trace but a trail of digital footprints. Bulgaria, with its strong technical skills base, a legacy of its communist-era focus on mathematics and engineering, and a struggling economy that left many young, tech-savvy individuals seeking lucrative opportunities, inadvertently became a breeding ground for cybercriminals. What began as small-scale scams and credit card fraud quickly evolved into sophisticated operations involving malware, phishing attacks, and money laundering on a global scale. The Bulgarian Mafia, with their established criminal networks, their access to capital, and their ruthlessness, were quick to recognize the potential of this new frontier. They began recruiting talented hackers and IT specialists, offering them protection, resources, and a share of the profits in exchange for their expertise. This shift towards cybercrime allowed the Bulgarian Mafia to diversify their portfolio, reducing their reliance on traditional forms of crime, such as drug trafficking and human smuggling, which carried a higher risk of detection and prosecution. Cybercrime, on the other hand, offered a lower risk, higher reward proposition, with perpetrators often operating from thousands of miles away beyond the reach of law enforcement. Skimming the surface from ATMs to cyber fortunes. Among the various forms of cybercrime embraced by the Bulgarian Mafia, ATM skimming emerged as a particularly lucrative specialty. This technique involves the use of sophisticated electronic devices often disguised to blend seamlessly with ATMs to steal cardholder data and PIN codes. Bulgarian skimming gangs, often operating in cells across Europe and beyond, displayed a remarkable level of organization and technical sophistication. They would install skimming devices on ATMs, often in tourist areas or during large events, capturing the data of unsuspecting victims. This data would then be used to create counterfeit cards, which would be used to withdraw cash from ATMs worldwide. The profits from ATM skimming were substantial, often reaching millions of euros in a single operation. The money would then be laundered through a complex web of shell companies, offshore accounts, and investments in legitimate businesses, making it extremely difficult for law enforcement agencies to track. Despite international efforts to combat ATM skimming, including enhanced security measures by banks and increased cooperation between law enforcement agencies, Bulgarian skimming gangs continued to thrive. Their ability to adapt quickly to new technologies, their sophisticated organizational structures, and their brazen disregard for the law made them a formidable force in the world of cybercrime. As the digital world became increasingly intertwined with our lives, the Bulgarian Mafia recognized the potential of a particularly insidious form of cybercrime ransomware. This malicious software, once installed on a victim's computer or network, encrypts their files, holding them hostage until a ransom is paid, often in Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, which offer a degree of anonymity. Bulgarian hackers and cybercriminal groups, often operating in collaboration with counterparts in other countries, became major players in the global ransomware epidemic. They targeted individuals, businesses, and even critical infrastructure such as hospitals and government agencies, causing widespread disruption and financial losses. The use of ransomware proved to be highly profitable for the Bulgarian Mafia. The anonymity of cryptocurrencies made it difficult to trace the payments, and the fear of losing valuable data or facing business disruption often compelled victims to pay the ransom. The rise of ransomware attacks, often attributed to Bulgarian cybercriminal groups, prompted a global response. Law enforcement agencies from multiple countries, including the United States and Europol, launched joint operations to dismantle these networks, arrest key figures, and seize illicit profits. However, the fight against ransomware continues. The Bulgarian Mafia, with their adaptability, their technical prowess, and their ability to exploit vulnerabilities in the digital world, remain a persistent threat, constantly evolving their tactics and seeking new targets in the ever-expanding digital landscape. The rise of the Bulgarian Mafia, from its roots in the chaos of the post-communist transition to its sophisticated forays into the digital underworld, presented a unique challenge for law enforcement agencies both within Bulgaria and internationally. Their decentralized structure, their ability to corrupt officials, and their mastery of operating in the shadows made them a difficult target to pin down. Within Bulgaria, public outrage over the Mafia's grip on society, coupled with pressure from the European Union, led to a series of high-profile crackdowns. Specialized police units were established, tasked with tackling organized crime, often with the assistance of international partners who provided training, intelligence sharing, and technical expertise. These crackdowns resulted in some notable successes. Luxury cars, properties, and bank accounts linked to suspected mafia figures were seized, and a number of high-ranking members of criminal organizations were arrested and brought to trial. These operations, often played out in the media, sent a message that the authorities were serious about tackling organized crime. However, these victories often felt like small dents in a vast, impenetrable machine. The Mafia, with their deep pockets and their network of informants, often received advance warning of raids, allowing them to move assets, destroy evidence, and spirit away key figures before the police could close in. The fight against the Bulgarian Mafia often resembled a frustrating game of whack-a-mole. Taking down one criminal group or disrupting one illicit activity seemed only to create a void that was quickly filled by others, eager to capitalize on the opportunity. The Mafia's decentralized structure, with its network of loosely affiliated cells and individuals operating independently, made it difficult to decapitate. Arresting a high-ranking boss often had little impact on the overall organization, as others were ready to step in and take their place. Furthermore, the Mafia's deep roots in Bulgarian society, its ability to corrupt officials, and its culture of intimidation made it difficult to dismantle from within. Witnesses were often too afraid to testify against powerful figures, and those who did cooperate with authorities faced the constant threat of retaliation against themselves or their families. The Mafia's adaptability was another key factor in its resilience. As law enforcement agencies became more sophisticated in their tactics, the Mafia adapted, finding new ways to launder money, smuggle goods, and exploit vulnerabilities in the system. Their embrace of cybercrime was a testament to their willingness to evolve and embrace new technologies to stay ahead of the law. Despite the efforts of law enforcement agencies, the Bulgarian Mafia's influence continues to cast a long shadow over the country. The fear of retaliation, the perception of widespread corruption, and a sense of resignation have created a culture of silence, where many Bulgarians are reluctant to speak out against organized crime, even when they are victims themselves. This culture of silence has allowed the Mafia to operate with a degree of impunity. Even when high-profile arrests are made, convictions are often difficult to secure as witnesses are intimidated or evidence disappears. This lack of accountability further emboldens criminal organizations and undermines public trust in the justice system. The price of silence is high. It allows organized crime to flourish, eroding the rule of law, stifling economic development, and undermining democratic institutions. It creates an environment where fear and intimidation trump justice and accountability, leaving ordinary citizens feeling powerless and vulnerable. Breaking this culture of silence is crucial for Bulgaria to move forward. This requires a multi-pronged approach, involving not only strengthening law enforcement and tackling corruption but also empowering citizens, protecting witnesses, and fostering a culture of transparency and accountability. The Bulgarian Mafia isn't just something you read about in history books. It's still here, a part of everyday life in Bulgaria. Even though people have tried for years to stop organized crime, it's still around, like a shadow that just won't go away. It reminds us of the problems Bulgaria still faces. The people involved might change and the way they do things might be different, but the same things are still happening. Powerful people doing bad things, corruption, and criminals getting away with their crimes. You can see what the Mafia has done by how scared some Bulgarians still are. People don't trust the government and think everything is corrupt. They think the real power isn't with the people we elect, but with criminals making secret deals behind the scenes. You can also see the Mafia's influence in how some people are very rich and show off their money, while regular people struggle to get by. It's clear that some businesses and parts of the government are corrupt, and it seems like only rich and powerful people can get fair treatment from the law. Bulgaria today stands at a crossroads caught between the promise of progress and the perils of its past. On the one hand, the country has made significant strides since the fall of communism. It has joined the European Union, its economy has grown, and its citizens enjoy greater freedoms than ever before. However, the shadow of organized crime still looms large, threatening to undermine these hard-won gains. The fight against the Mafia is far from over. It requires ongoing vigilance, unwavering commitment, and a willingness to address the root causes that allow organized crime to flourish. The challenge for Bulgaria is to navigate this complex reality, to build on its successes while acknowledging its shortcomings. It requires a commitment to strengthening democratic institutions, promoting transparency and accountability, and empowering citizens to hold those in power accountable. The fight against organized crime is not just a task for law enforcement agencies, it's a collective responsibility that demands the participation of all segments of society. Breaking the silence that has allowed the mafia to thrive is crucial for Bulgaria to move forward. This requires fostering a culture where citizens feel safe to report crime, where witnesses are protected, and where journalists can expose wrongdoing without fear of reprisal. It means strengthening the judiciary, rooting out corruption, and ensuring that the rule of law applies equally to all. It's time for Bulgaria to shed the image of being a haven for organized crime and reclaim its narrative. It's time to empower a new generation of Bulgarians who refuse to be defined by the sins of the past, who believe in the promise of a brighter future, and who are willing to fight for it. The journey ahead will be long and arduous, but the stakes are too high to ignore. The future of Bulgaria depends on its ability to confront its demons, to break the cycle of impunity, and to build a society where justice, transparency, and accountability prevail. The time for action is now.